You are looking at a city that does not exist. No address, no map, no name on any public record. But underneath the Ural Mountains, right now, tens of thousands of people are living inside it. The Russian government spent decades building this place. Not a bunker, not a base, a full city, schools, hospitals, factories, streets, all underground, all sealed behind blast doors 2 meters thick. And here's the part that stops you cold. They may have built dozens more just like it, but the foundation wasn't even the hardest part. The Soviet Union in 1947 had a problem. America had the bomb. The USSR did not. That changed on August 29, 1949. The first Soviet nuclear test shook the steppes of Kazakhstan. The Cold War arms race was no longer theoretical. It was physics. It was fire. It was real. Soviet military planners understood something immediately. Cities on the surface were now targets, not assets. A single warhead could erase Moscow in under a second. Leningrad, Kyiv, Minsk, all gone in a morning. So Stalin's government began asking a different question, not how to win a nuclear war, but how to survive one. The answer they arrived at was staggering in scale. They would take critical infrastructure completely underground. Watch what happens when you combine that idea with the Ural Mountains, one of the oldest ranges on Earth. The Urals stretch over 2,500 kilometers through central Russia. Granite and gneiss, some formations over 300 million years old. Natural insulation, seismic stability, depth. The mountains were the perfect host, and inside them, construction began in total silence. The project that would become known by outsiders as Yamantau, or Mount Yamantau, started sometime in the 1950s. The mountain itself rises to 1,640 meters, the highest peak in the southern Urals. Soviet engineers drove tunnels directly into its granite core. The work went on for years before anyone knew it existed. Then everything changed. By 1979, satellite reconnaissance was transforming what intelligence agencies could see. American analysts noticed something strange near Beloretsk: heavy rail lines running into the mountain, industrial cranes, spoil heaps of excavated rock. The excavated volume alone told a story. Hundreds of thousands of cubic meters removed over decades. Whatever was being built inside Yamantau was enormous. No military base needed that kind of hollow. Then the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, and the construction did not stop. That was the detail that unnerved Western analysts most. New Russia, no money, severe economic crisis, still digging. American officials asked Russian counterparts directly through diplomatic channels. The answers shifted with every conversation. Mining facility, said one official. Food storage, said another. Government disaster retreat. Presidential bunker. Emergency archive. Each answer replaced the last without explanation. Here's where it gets impossible. The town of Mezhgorsk sits at the base of Yamantau. Population estimates range from 10,000 to 30,000. It does not appear in standard Russian government directories. No civilian can move there without special clearance. Supplies enter by dedicated rail from Ufa, 150 kilometers west. The line is guarded along its entire length. Road access requires checkpoints at multiple points. Photographers who have approached those roads have been turned back. The town exists. It has appeared in obscure Russian regional documents, but its residents essentially vanish from public record. You are looking at a closed city, one of over 40 that Russia still officially maintains. During the Soviet era, there were more than 100. They were called Zatos, closed administrative territorial formations, each one built around a secret function: weapons research, uranium enrichment, nuclear assembly. Mezhgorsk is different because nobody will confirm its function. Every other Zato has at least an implied purpose. This one has nothing. But there was a problem with building a city underground that Soviet engineers had to solve before anything else. The next phase is where the real engineering begins. Carving habitable space into granite at scale requires more than explosives and time. Soviet engineers faced three critical challenges simultaneously: ventilation, water, structural integrity under mountain load. The granite at depth creates pressures engineers call rock burst zones, places where the mountain itself can suddenly crack inward. Managing that requires a system of pressure relief tunnels, smaller passages bored around the main chambers to redirect stress. The Mezhgorsk facility is believed to use this technique throughout. Structural supports have been spotted in the few images that exist. Ventilation at this depth requires industrial filtration systems, not just air circulation, but NBC filtration, nuclear. biological, chemical. A system capable of protecting tens of thousands of people requires fan arrays, scrubbers, and sealed emergency reserves. The power load alone for that system would match a mid-sized Soviet city at peak draw, which explains the power infrastructure built into Beloretsk and the dedicated transmission lines running toward the mountain. Watch what happens at the 2-kilometer depth estimate. At 2 kilometers underground, water pressure changes fundamentally. Natural groundwater infiltration becomes a constant engineering fight. Soviet tunnel builders used a process called grouting, injecting pressurized cement into surrounding rock to stop seepage. The Yamantau complex required this technique across every major chamber. Tens of thousands of injection points over decades of work. Then there is the question of food and supply redundancy. A city that cannot receive deliveries during an attack needs to sustain itself completely for months, possibly years. Russian defense analysts who have discussed the facility openly suggest it holds reserves for 6 months of full operation. That means grain stores, water reserves, fuel cells, and medical supplies, all cycled and rotated constantly even now. The infrastructure alone, not counting the people, would fill a surface warehouse complex covering dozens of hectares. And that was just the beginning. Because Yamantau is not unique. It may not even be the largest. In 2012, a former Soviet general named Vladimir Dvorkin acknowledged publicly that Russia maintains a network of such facilities. The term used in Russian strategic planning is continuity of government, a doctrine that nuclear war must not end the state. The United States has its own version: Mount Weather in Virginia, Raven Rock in Pennsylvania, NORAD in Cheyenne Mountain. But the Russian program, by most estimates, is larger and built into terrain that makes access nearly impossible. The Yamantau complex is believed to connect to at least one other major facility via deep tunnel rail. A tunnel rail system under the Urals, boring through granite for hundreds of kilometers. What they built would force every assumption about survival to be reconsidered. Here is what a person standing in Mezhgorsk sees, or would if they were ever allowed near it. A mid-sized Russian industrial town. Apartment blocks, government buildings, functional, orderly, Soviet in layout and feel. Residents work either at the surface facility or below it. Nobody explains which. Children attend school. Goods arrive by rail. Power stays constant. Mezhgorsk, on its surface, looks unremarkable. Then you notice the fences, then the antenna arrays above the ridgeline, then the ventilation shafts, gray steel caps, rising from the hillside at regular intervals. And you realize what you see on the surface is the skin over something far, far larger. The U.S. Congress asked Russia formally about Yamantau in 1997. During a period of post-Cold War cooperation, Russian officials told the delegation, through official channels, that the complex was a mining and storage facility. They offered no inspection, no documentation, no tour. The answer was delivered, and the conversation was over. American negotiators pressed twice more through different channels. The same answer came back both times. Congress was not satisfied, but it had no options. Yamantau was on Russian sovereign territory, deep inside Russian mountains. Then something happened that nobody expected. In 2019, Russian state media published a feature on the Ural region celebrating local infrastructure achievements. Inside the feature, briefly, a reference to underground facility upgrades near Beloretsk, described only as modernization of reserve systems. No further detail, no images, pulled from one archive shortly after. But analysts had already captured it. Modernization meant the facility was not historical. It was active, and it was being improved right now. That single phrase told Western intelligence analysts more than a decade of satellite imagery had confirmed before. The facility under Yamantau is not a relic. It is a living, functioning city, being upgraded in 2019. Watch what happens when you cross-reference that against Russian military spending. Between 2012 and 2022, Russia allocated significant budget increases, specifically to what the Ministry of Defense calls strategic infrastructure. This category, in publicly available budget documents, includes hardened command facilities and continuity systems. The numbers increased sharply following 2014. Following 2022, the increases accelerated again. A facility of Yamantau's scale costs an estimated $1 to $2 billion annually to maintain at full operational status. That budget line exists, buried in categories, but it exists. Here's the part nobody outside Russia's command structure fully understands. Who actually lives inside Mezhgorsk and who would go underground? follows a specific Soviet and Russian continuity doctrine. Tier 1, heads of state, cabinet, supreme military command. Tier 2, agency heads, intelligence chiefs, nuclear command officers. Tier 3, and this is the part that makes Yamantau different. From a simple leadership bunker, civilian technical staff, engineers, medical personnel, scientists, logistics specialists. People needed not just to survive, but to rebuild. The doctrine is not survival for its own sake. It is survival in order to reconstitute a functioning industrial state, underground, capable of emerging after a nuclear exchange and restarting the Russian economy. That ambition required a city, not a bunker. And that is what they built. The legacy of Yamantau is not just its scale. It is what it represents about how Russia sees the future. While other nuclear powers built shelters and hardened command posts, Russia built continuity. Industrial, governmental, and human continuity. The 1960s construction. The 1970s expansion. The 1980s full build-out, the 1990s continued work through economic collapse, the 2010s modernization, the 2020s upgrades, ongoing, funded, active. The Ural Mountains have watched empires come and go for centuries. Mongol, Tsarist, Soviet, Russian Federation, each left something behind in those mountains. The newest thing buried there may be the most consequential. Right now, as you watch this, the ventilation systems below Yamantau are cycling. The lights are on. The rail lines are maintained. Tens of thousands of people live in Mezhgorsk, above a city that, officially, does not exist. Nobody visits. Nobody leaves without clearance. And the mountain does not answer questions. They said cities had to be visible to be real. They built one anyway, and buried it a kilometer deep. Subscribe to Built Impossible.